Welcome back to the consideration of Biology Waec past question for the year 2010. I'm Lillian, and before we proceed, I would like you to follow us on our social media handles at instaschool_edu on Instagram and on Facebook, and at instaschool_live on Twitter. Today we'll be treating question 31 to 60. Question 31 says, a herbivore cannot feed on a piece of meat because it has no dash. Now, before we proceed, what is a herbivore? A herbivore refers to an animal that is capable of feeding only on plants. These animals can feed on vegetables, grass, and so on. For example, cows. Cows have the ability to feed on grass and plant products, but they cannot feed on meat like carnivore and omnivore. And why is this so? This is because they lack canine. This canine is used by carnivores and omnivores to tear flesh apart. And also, the digestive system of herbivore enables them to process and digest only nutrients from plants. So this is the reason why they cannot feed on meat or flesh like carnivores and omnivores. Now, going back to our question, we have our answer as option B, which is canine to tear the meat, because carnivores are unique due to the canine that they have to tear flesh or meat. Now, moving on to our question 32. In a particular habitat, the role of an organism is referred to as its dash. The role that an organism plays in an environment and also how it responds to its environment under different circumstances is its niche. For example, how an organism responds when there is an abundance of resource, or how it adapts when there is scarcity of resource. This is its niche. So our answer therefore is option C, the niche. The niche is the role of an organism in a particular habitat. Question 33. The distribution of organisms in a freshwater habitat, like a stream or pond, is determined by the following factor except dash. Now, like the stream and the pond that we mentioned, which are freshwater environments, we can find both plants and animals that are adapted to living in such an environment. Now, some of the abiotic factors that affect their survival is sunlight. Sunlight helps the plants that are found in this freshwater habitat to grow and to photosynthesize. Another factor is temperature. Temperature of freshwater varies with season, and this can affect organisms. Another factor is heavy rainfall, that is, flooding. This can also lead to the reduction or the extinction of some of these plants. And this will have a great impact on the herbivores in the aquatic environment, because they will not get enough food, that is, because they feed on plants, they won't get enough food to eat. Now, what is our answer? The odd one out of these options is our option B, pH of the soil. This is because freshwater habitat is an aquatic habitat and not a terrestrial habitat, because one of the abiotic factors that can affect terrestrial habitats can be the pH of the soil. But since this is an aquatic environment, the pH of the soil is not one of the factors that affects it. Moving on to question 34. The speed of wind is measured using the dash. The speed of wind can be measured using an anemometer. This anemometer is used to measure the air pressure and is used by meteorologists, that is, scientists that study the weather and the climate and how they affect the environment. So when we want to measure the speed of wind, we use an anemometer. Question 35. Which of the following is a biotic component of the ecosystem? Now, an ecosystem can be affected or is made up of both biotic and abiotic factors. Now, some of the abiotic factors include rainfall, sunlight, weather, and even temperature. These are the non-living components of the ecosystem. On the other hand, the biotic factors include people like humans, plants, and also animals, the living components of the ecosystem. Other examples of biotic components, that is living things, are the fungi and the bacteria. Now, going back to our question, which of these is a biotic component of the ecosystem? We can see that the soil, rainfall, and even sunlight are all abiotic components. The only biotic component of the ecosystem from our option is the fungi. Now we move on to our question 36. A moss plant can withstand drought by means of its dash. Now first, what are mosses? Mosses are non-vascular plants. And when we say they are non-vascular plants, it means that they lack vascular tissues, that is, the xylem and the phloem. So to help them in storing nutrients, they have spores. These spores also help them to withstand unfavorable conditions like drought when there is a decrease or no rainfall at all. These spores is also the means of asexual reproduction in mosses and can be dispersed by air because they are tiny. So when we go back to our question, our option A describes our answer. The moss plant can withstand drought by means of its spores. Question 36, 7. Which of the following is the main problem facing xerophytic plants? What are xerophytic plants? Xerophytic plants refers to the plants that are adapted to living in hot and dry conditions. For example, we find xerophytic plants in the desert. These plants have to adapt to living with lack of adequate water from time to time. Now, when we go back to our option, we have option D, lack of adequate water. Because in the desert, there is usually little or no rainfall over a long period of time. So xerophytes or xerophytic plants have to put up with this problem. Now moving on to question 38. The following are greenhouse gases except dash. Greenhouse gases refers to those gases that can cause greenhouse effect. And this greenhouse effect does not have a very good effect on our ecosystem because it causes climate change. Now, some of the greenhouse gases that we have is hydrofluorocarbon, methane, chlorofluorocarbon, that is a combination of carbon, fluorine, and chlorine. This chlorofluorocarbon can be used as refrigerants. Another greenhouse gas that we have is carbon dioxide and even water vapor. Now going back to our option, the only odd one out of our option is oxygen. Oxygen is not an example of greenhouse gases. If you remember, animals take in oxygen produced by plants. So it is not among the greenhouse gases. Our question 39. Rural-urban migration in developing countries can be prevented by dash. How can we prevent the rural-urban migration? But first, what is the rural-urban migration? It simply refers to people living in rural areas like villages, going or moving to urban areas like big cities. Now, some of the reason they do this is due to employment purposes. Now, how can we reduce this migration? It's by providing employment in the rural areas and also ensuring that there is enough facilities in both the rural and urban area, such as standard healthcare centers, good roads, and other things. When there is a balance in these facilities, there will be a reduction in the migration from the rural to the urban area. So our answer is therefore option D. When there is an even distribution, that is an equal distribution of facilities in both the rural area and the urban area, this will prevent or minimize the migration, especially in developing countries. Question 40. Muscles are attached to bones by means of dash. The muscles are soft tissues that help us to perform activities like jumping or other activities that may require force. Now, these muscles can be joined to the bones by tendons. What are these tendons? Tendons are a flexible, rope-like tissues. This tissue helps to attach the muscles not only to the bones, but also it can also be found in different parts of our body. Now, depending on the type of muscle they are attached to, they come in different shape and size. So when we go back to our question, the muscles are attached to the bones by means of tendons. Question 41. In a population, food shortage may lead to dash. A population refers to the total number of similar organisms living together in a particular area. For example, we have the human population, the population of lion in a forest. So when there is shortage of food in a population, this can lead to migration, that is, organisms going out of their population to look for food. But another thing that shortage of food can lead to is competition among the species. When there is a reduced number of food, the species compete for the limited food that is available. So our answer therefore is option C, intraspecific competition, that is, competition between organisms of the same species in a particular population. Now we move on to the question 42. The following effects are associated with deforestation except dash. Now when we talk about deforestation, this is when trees are removed from the forest on a large scale. and is usually done by humans. Some of the activities of humans to obtain fuel, construction materials, or even for agricultural purpose. All of these can lead to deforestation. When deforestation occurs on a large scale, it can lead to climate change. And why do we say so? Because there is a large decrease in the number of trees in the forest. And remember that trees sometimes act as windbreakers. Deforestation can also lead to soil erosion. Also, some plant species can go into extinction if the deforestation rate is high. Another effect of deforestation is displacement of wild animals, because we know that most wild animals stay in the forest. But when there is a reduced number of trees, most of these animals have no place to stay. So when we look at our option, the following effects associated with deforestation, except dash. We can see that migration of wildlife is one of the effects. Extinction of plant species is also one of the effects, and also erosion. The only effect that is not associated with deforestation is increase in rainfall. Moving on to question 43. The main reason for the conservation of wildlife is to dash. Now, why do you think we need to conserve our wildlife, that is, preserve the lives of wild animals? Simply because they do not go into extinction. Because there are some wildlife that are on the list of endangered species. That is, they're on the brink of extinction. So we need to conserve them so they do not go away forever. So our answer is option D. Conservation of wildlife is to save some species from extinction. Question 44. Which of the following is an example of variation? Now, variation is the differences that exist between individuals of the same species, and it usually arises due to our genetic makeup. Now, an example of a variation is rolling of tongue. It is a physiological variation, and this is not an ability that everybody possesses. It occurs only in few people. So we can say that this is an example of variation. So the ability to roll tongue is an example of variation. That's our option B. Moving on to question 45. The parameters of size, height, weight, and color in a population of living things are examples of dash. The weight of an individual, the height of an individual, their skin color, their hair color are all examples of continuous variation. And these continuous variations are controlled by many genes within an individual. So our answer is option C. This is a type of variation. Now question 46. Fingerprints are useful in crime detection because dash. Well, as you may know, no two human beings has the same DNA or the same fingerprints. That is, fingerprint is unique to every human. And this is why most forensic scientists, that is, scientists that use scientific investigation to investigate a crime, use fingerprints because it is very useful to detect thieves and criminals. So our answer is option C. No two people have the same fingerprint. Question 47. A person with blood group O can be given blood from persons who have blood belonging to dash. People or persons with blood group O are known as the universal donors. And this is because they can donate blood to all other blood groups. That is blood group A, blood group B, blood group AB, and fellow blood group O. But they can only receive blood from their fellow blood group O, either O positive or O negative. So let's go back to our question. A person with blood group O can be given blood from persons who have blood belonging to blood group O only. That's our option A. Question 48. A man heterozygous for albino gene marries a woman who is also heterozygous for the gene. Both have normal skin color. The probability that they will have an albino child is dash. Now, the man that is heterozygous for albino traits has the genetic formula of capital A and small a, and the same goes for the woman. So a cross between these two will produce, from our Punnett square, we see that they will produce 3 normal children, 3 normal skinned children, and only one of their child will have an albino skin. That is, only one of these child will be homozygous for these traits. So that's 25%, that is 25 over 100, which is also 1 over 4. So when we go to our options, our option B is the most correct because it is 1 over 4. That is the percentage, the probability that this couple will have an albino child. Question 49. Which of the following statements about heredity is not true? In heredity, the traits are dash. Well, when we look at the way we look or the way we behave sometimes, it depends largely on our parents. And heredity helps to explain how the traits are transferred from parents to offspring. Most times we look so much like one of our parents or both of our parents, and this is because some of the traits from our parents are transmitted through our genes, like our eye color, our behavior, and our resistance to certain disease. But we also know that an individual inherits traits from both of his parents. So the wrong option here is the option C. Heredity is not always transmitted by one parent. It involves 2 of the parents. Our question 50. An example of saprophytic relationship is A or and dash. When we talk about saprophytic relationship, it refers to when an organism obtains its food from dead and decaying matter, usually by breaking down these matter. Some of the examples of saprophytes are fungi like mushroom and yeast. We also have bacteria. So when we go back to our question, we have our option B as the most correct. Mushroom growing on decaying vegetation is an example of saprophytic relationship. But you might wonder why we did not choose option A, a vulture feeding on decaying meat. Why we did not classify vulture feeding on decaying meat as a saprophytic relationship is because the vulture is an example of scavenger, and scavengers feed on dead animals. This is quite different from saprophytes. Saprophytes break down dead organic matters. Now we move on to question 51. In artificial vegetation, Individuals without desirable traits may be prevented from mating by dash. When we talk of artificial vegetation, this is the artificial development of new plants, that is, humans or using human intervention to bring about new plants by joining two different plants. And why do we do this most of the times? It is to produce healthier crops with better qualities. But if we want to prevent the mating of two plants, probably because they do not have traits that the farmers that do not want them to mix up, they can be sterilized. So our answer is option B. Sterilization can be done to prevent individuals that do not have desirable traits from mating. Question 52. In a family of 8, all the children are girls. That is, a mother and a father has 6 girls. Which of the following reasons correctly explains this? Now, producing a girl child largely depends on the father. And why do we say so? Because the mother can only produce X chromosome. So a mother can only produce X chromosome, that is 2X chromosome. But the father can produce both X chromosome and Y chromosome. So when the mother produces X chromosome and the father produces Y chromosome, the child or the offspring will be a male. On the other hand, if the father produces only X chromosome and this mixes with the mother's X chromosome, it brings about a girl child. So from our question, we can see that the family of 8 with the children being girls is dependent on the fact that the X component of the man's sex chromosome was always involved. Question 53. Which of the following is correct about the structure of a chromosome? The chromosomes are thread-like structures that are found inside the nucleus of our cell. It can be found even in the cells of plants. And these chromosomes are joined together at the middle, which is known as the centromere. So when we go back to our option, we have our option A as the most correct. These two chromatids are joined at the centromere to form the chromosome. That's option A. Now question 54. Mr. Andrew, his wife and child belong to blood group A, B, and O respectively. What that means is Mr. Andrew belongs to blood group A, while his wife belongs to blood group B, and their child belongs to blood group O. Now the question is the genotypes of both parents are dash. Now, Mr. Andrew is dominant for IA to IO, while his wife is dominant for IB to IO. And this explains why their child has the blood group O. So if we go back to our option, the most correct answer is D. The both parent, that is Mr. Andrew and his wife, belongs to blood group IA-IO and IB-IO respectively. Question 55. What could be the phenotypic ratio of the offspring of a cross between a heterozygous dominant parent and a double recessive parent. Now let's say that the trait is represented by A. So the heterozygous parent will be capital A, small a, while the double recessive parent will be small a, small a. The cross between these two, that is heterozygous and recessive, will produce two heterozygous offspring and two recessive offspring, that is ratio 2:2. But since we do not have that in our option, we can settle for ratio 1:1. This is still meaning the same thing, that is we divide 2 by 2. Now moving on to our question 56. The percentage probability that a normal male married to a carrier woman would have a hemophilic male child is dash. Now, hemophilia is a rare condition and it affects the blood's ability to clot, especially after an injury. Males usually suffer from hemophilia and they inherit it from their parents. But some women are also carriers of this disease, but they do not suffer from this disease. So the union between a normal male and a carrier woman will produce two normal children, that is a normal boy and a normal girl. Then it will produce a carrier girl and one hemophilic boy. So each of their sons has a 1/2 chance of being hemophilic, that is, can either be hemophilic or not hemophilic. This is 50%, that is, if they have two boys, with each of them having a 1/2 chance of being hemophilic, this simply means that it is 50%. So the percentage of having a hemophilic child, male child, is 50%. The importance of courtship in animals includes the following, except now courtship behavior in animal is quite different from different species. Frogs use song to attract their mates. Other animal species also have their different method of courtship. They do this in order to obtain a mate for reproduction purpose. Courtship can also help different animal species to protect their territory because it provides a safe place for mating between animals. So the only odd one out of our option is that courtship coincides with the ovulation period and ensures fertilization, because as I've explained, courtship ensures that the female chooses the right male species. It also helps to protect their territory. So option D is the answer. Now moving on to question 58. In evolution, analogous structures are significant because they show dash. Now, analogous structure are the features of different species that perform the same function. And what do I mean? I mean to say that different species having different features, but these features perform the same function. And this is because of the difference in the ancestral origin, that is, difference in the ancestor. And another factor is environmental change, like the beak of birds, and also the wings of bats and birds. These are different in their structure, but they perform the same function. So in evolution, these analogous structures are physiological functions. And we say this because they show similar functions for different species. So our answer therefore is A, physiological diversity. Now our question 59. Which of the following statements reflect the mechanism of natural selection. When we talk about natural selection, this is the process by which organisms in a population adapt to changes. These changes can cause variation among these species, that is, organisms of the same species. So our answer is there, our option A. There are variations within every species, and this is because of natural selection. Lastly, our question 60. Which of the following animals exhibit territoriality? Territoriality refers to the ability of some animals to defend their area of territory. And they do this for mating purpose, for feeding purpose, and other reasons. Now, some of the vertebrates that exhibit this territoriality is the lizard. The lizard exhibits territoriality. It protects its territory from predators. That's our option C. Thank you so much for joining us till the end of the consideration of biology past question for the year 2010. I'm Lillian and this is Insta School.